All right, let's start working on some texture. So these are a couple texture challenges. Now this isn't the only way of doing this, but this is one of my ways of doing this. So I went ahead and printed off the slide so I have a good reference. And I'm gonna start with this texture here. Now what I see here is that there are clumps of different amounts of value, but everything is very directional. So I need to keep my lines consistent. They don't have to be perfect, but they need to be consistent between each other. So I'm gonna go ahead and add, I'm gonna add a little bit more lines here and just kind of following a shape similar to that. And as I'm layering, it's gonna get a little darker. And I can go and add my other shape here. Maybe one over here. But right now this just looks splotchy, like there's not a whole lot to it. And that's because I have not added a lot of line quality. So as I'm layering a little bit more, this isn't the white of a paper. That's not equivalent to this. So I need to add a little bit more value to it. And then layer a little bit more on. Going back and forth. The whole thing's about layering. Another option is if you have a white pen, you can always go back over top and lighten some areas and also add little amounts of these little fur pieces here. So I'm looking at some of these have a little bit of a curve to them. As long as I'm consistent, it doesn't look like I'm doing cross-hatching. And it looks like some of the deeper areas here are a little bit darker. So I'm gonna add that in there. And I would continue this on until I have more of a fur section. And I don't want it to be blocked off because all of this has a very fluid point, it is going to be kind of blended between them. It's not a harsh line except for if it's between hairs. So if I'm noticing, let's say I put a whole line here and I'm like, oh, that's a big difference between that part and that part. I need to add a little bit more value. And notice as I'm adding a little bit more, it's starting to come alive and look more like fur. They don't have to be perfect. They just have to be believable as fur. And really go back and forth looking at what you see. Don't just assume you know what you're looking at. Draw what you see, not what you know, not what you think. All right, so that would be our cat fur texture. That's as close as I'm gonna get on that. Now, let's go ahead and move over, and you would actually fill in more space. Let's move over to the grass. Now, the grass, I need to have something a little bit more consistent. Because the grass has different sections, I'm gonna go ahead and use my drawing pencil and eraser to kind of draw in the blade of grass I'm gonna start with. So I'm gonna start with this blade of grass here with the one that crosses over. I'm gonna look at the shapes that I see. It kind of has a bump. It comes down and over, and something crosses right about there. And it comes down and in. And I have this one across there. And you would be adding a lot more. And I'm also noticing that the lines are going more of this direction, and I have lines going this direction. I have shadow here, just mapping in these shapes. Looks like there's a little triangle there, a line here, a line here. So now that I'm looking at this, I'm going to start adding in some of my value. I'm not going to go too dark at first, and I'm going to make sure my lines are consistent. That's how it's going to look, like it's not a random piece of something. So I'm going to go with the lines, and I'm adding value. And I'm going to start in the shadow, that way if I accidentally go too far, it's okay. And it looks like, see, I'm not outlining everything initially. I'm just going where my values are. It doesn't look like much, but it's okay, because I can always add more to it. I'm letting some of these lines, because they are going through the lighter section, cross over. I'm going to try to make these a little bit more crisp than I did the fur. And I'm going to turn my paper to make this a little bit more comfortable for the lines going this direction. So it looks like it's really dark right there. So I'm going to look at those values and add that in. And I think I'm also going to add in a little bit of what's behind it. If I notice that my background is a little darker, instead of giving it that outline, I'm going to kind of fade out the background. With some of my hatching lines. You can start to make it look more like a blade of grass.